Hello, how are you? Many people who are in the process of losing weight get a bit worried about eating fruit. And sometimes they ask me which fruit makes you gain the most weight. They want to know which fruit they need to be more careful with and eat in moderation. So I'm going to answer that for you today. Stay with me until the end, you won't want to miss it. First of all, if you're new here, welcome. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. I have new videos every day. You won't want to miss them. If you know someone who has the same question, who wants to know which fruit makes you gain the most weight, share this video. Let's spread this positive message because that's what I want most for this channel. Many people get really worried about whether or not they should eat fruit during the weight loss process. A lot of people are afraid because there's a kind of nutritional fear-mongering. They say you should be careful with fruit because it will make you gain weight, or that fruit can really spike your blood sugar. But we know that fruits are very rich in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants as long as we eat the whole fruit. I'm not talking about sweetened and strained fruit juice. Fruit is extremely healthy. In fact, it's a great option for getting these nutrients if you have trouble eating a large amount of vegetables. Especially for some children who often refuse to eat vegetables, and for the elderly, it ends up being a very interesting option for us to add to the diet. But many people are afraid. Will mango make you gain weight? What about watermelon, avocado, coconut, banana? Which of these is the most caloric and will make you gain more weight? Which one should you be more careful with? I'm going to answer that right here, right now. Let's start by talking about some of these particular fruits that are often considered the villains of the weight loss process, the ones people usually cut out of their diets when they want to lose weight. Let's start by talking about avocado, because avocado is really trendy these days. It's super healthy, but many people who want to lose weight decide not to eat it because it's very caloric, even though it's very healthy. So let's analyze the calories in avocado. In 100 grams of avocado, we have approximately 160 calories, which is nothing outrageous and won't harm your diet. Besides, these 160 calories are divided as follows. There are 8.5 grams of carbohydrates, but out of that total, 7 grams are fiber. So you can see that the amount of net carbohydrates, which is when we subtract the fiber from the total carbohydrates, is only about 1.5 grams. Therefore, avocado will not affect your insulin secretion. Insulin is a hormone that will make you accumulate fat if you consume excess calories. And since avocado does not promote this insulin spike, it is very good for controlling hunger. It also has a very interesting amount of protein, 2 grams of protein, and contains 15 grams of fat. So it provides you with a lot of satiety, keeping you feeling full for longer. These fats are wonderful fats, monounsaturated fats. So if you know how to use avocado the right way, for example, if you use those 100 grams in a smoothie, it will give you a great feeling of fullness after the meal you've had. You can make a salad dressing and add avocado. There's even a recipe for avocado mayonnaise here on the channel. You can make the traditional guacamole, not just for sweet dishes, but it's also a great addition to savory dishes, especially if you're on a low-carb diet, or if you're cutting down on carbohydrates and want healthy sources of fat to add to your diet. It's an excellent option for weight loss. Another fruit that many people are afraid to eat, which has an undeservedly bad reputation that doesn't match reality, is watermelon. Many people say that watermelon has a super high glycemic index, that watermelon is very high in calories. But when we look at 100 grams of watermelon, just as I analyzed 100 grams of avocado, it has about 30 calories on average and 8 grams of carbohydrates. In fact, it has practically no protein, fiber, or fat, which is why people say to be careful, because watermelon will make you gain a lot of weight, since its glycemic index is very high. It's only partially true. The glycemic index of watermelon is high, but its glycemic load is not. And glycemic load is related to how many grams of that food you consume in relation to the amount of carbohydrates, fiber, and protein. The glycemic load of watermelon is low because it has a high water content, so it will help you stay very hydrated. Even though it's sweet, if you look at 100 grams, you'll see that it doesn't have an excessive amount of carbohydrates. So it's a great option for you to replace a flan. It's worth swapping ice cream or pudding for watermelon as a dessert or afternoon snack. It's a good choice for those who want to lose weight, as long as you eat just one slice, not the whole watermelon, because there's always someone in the comments asking if they can eat the entire watermelon. In that case, you'll have to do the math, because it won't just be 100 grams. A watermelon can weigh up to 4 kilos, 9 pounds, so be careful with that. Now I'm going to talk about mango and banana because they're more or less similar in terms of composition. Of course it will vary since there are many different types of bananas and also many different types of mangoes. But on average, in 100 grams of banana, there will be around 90 calories with 20 to 22 grams of carbohydrates, about 2 to 3 grams of fiber, and practically no protein or fat. And mango will vary more, because there are mango varieties where 100 grams of the fruit will have between 12 and 19 grams of carbohydrates, but you can see it's more or less in the same range as banana, maybe a little less, with 2 grams of fiber, but also without protein and without fat. So these are fruits that are naturally very sweet, especially when we eat them in their season, when they're really fresh and ripe. They become incredibly sweet and juicy. That's exactly why many people end up being quite afraid to eat them, thinking they might have too much sugar. Just like I mentioned with watermelon, it's really just a matter of managing how much you eat and being mindful of your choices. Because once again, if you swap out a dessert like candy or ice cream for a mango or a banana, maybe warmed up with a bit of cinnamon, that's a great option for you. It will satisfy your sweet tooth in a more natural, healthier way and still feel like a treat. You just can't do what I've seen some people mention in the comments on the video about whether bananas make you gain or lose weight, people saying they eat 8 bananas, almost a whole bunch. That doesn't work because if you're trying to lose weight, depending on the approach you're following, if you eat that many bananas, you're definitely not on a low-carb diet. You'll need to control your portions. You'll have to spread it out throughout the day. But once again, it's a fruit you can definitely have as an afternoon snack, maybe with some nuts or chia seeds, and it gives you a good feeling of fullness, keeps you satisfied for longer, so it is indeed a good option for those who want to lose weight. Another fruit that people are always very concerned about is coconut. It has more or less the same composition profile as avocado itself because it's a fruit that has little carbohydrate. In about 100 grams of coconut, we have 350 calories, which is quite a lot, with 15 grams of carbohydrates but with 9 grams of fiber. So the amount of net carbohydrates in coconut is also much lower. And we have 3 grams of protein and 33 grams of fat. So you might think that coconut is super high in calories, but if you take a scale and weigh out 100 grams of coconut to eat, you'll see that it's practically impossible to consume that much in a single meal. Normally, we just sprinkle a little grated coconut on top of yogurt or granola that we make. It's not a fruit that you usually eat every day on a regular basis or in large amounts because it really is very filling. So for me, coconut is not the most dangerous fruit for those who want to lose weight. Now I'll tell you which one is. The fruit that makes you gain the most weight, the one you need to be most careful with if you're trying to lose weight, is the raisin. It's nothing more than a dehydrated grape, so it ends up containing a very high amount of carbohydrates and its glycemic index is extremely high. Just to give you an idea, in 100 grams of raisins, there are 400 calories, meaning it beats all the others so far, even coconut. There are 80 grams of carbohydrates, which is like eating 2 plates of pasta in just 100 grams of raisins. There are 4 grams of fiber, which isn't much, 3 grams of protein, and practically no fat, meaning the glycemic index is extremely high. It raises your blood sugar a lot, sends a signal to your brain, releases a lot of insulin, and leads to a lot of fat accumulation. And I'm saying this for 2 main reasons, because many people decide to eat healthier and sometimes start replacing their afternoon cookies with a bunch of raisins. They grab a handful of raisins, a whole bag of raisins, and keep eating, thinking they're doing the right thing. Raisins, dried apricots, dates. Be careful with all dried fruits because they all have the same composition and go through the same process of drying and concentrating a lot of sugars. So if you don't use sugar to make your cake but add a date paste, it's practically the same amount of sugar. Of course, it will have more fiber, it will have iron, it will be more interesting in terms of sugar quality, but in terms of calories, it will add almost as many carbohydrates as if it were sugar. So be careful with that. Sometimes the reduction is very small compared to what you think you're gaining from it, and it might not be worth the trade-off in the end. Another important point to keep in mind is that many of these dried fruits have sugar added during the dehydration process. So when you go to buy them, always make sure to check the label carefully to see if any sugars or syrups have been added, as these ingredients will increase the carbohydrate content even more. I'm not trying to say that you can't eat raisins, dates, or dried apricots if you're trying to lose weight. For example, I even have recipes here on the channel for salads where I add raisins. But the amount of fiber, protein, and healthy fats is balanced so that the raisins aren't so significant in terms of carbohydrate content and blood sugar increase. If we manage to organize the other ingredients, it's possible to add them sparingly in small amounts to satisfy that craving for raisins without any problem. In the same way, if you're going to make a dessert based on dates and you want to improve it, you can maybe add oats, chia seeds, or yogurt to slow down the absorption of the carbohydrates from the dates. That's the idea of this video. Now tell me down below what your favorite fruit is. It doesn't have to be one of the ones I mentioned. Let me know which fruit is the hardest for you to control the amount you eat because you just love to have it. I'd love to see your comment here. Share this video with anyone you know who could benefit from this information. Let's work together, you and I, to expand this chain of good, because that's what I want here on the channel. Speaking of helping each other, like the video, it helps me out, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications. I post new videos every day with tips on fitness, health, and nutrition, and I make lots of wonderful recipes you won't want to miss. See you next time. Bye.